The following is going to be a reading and refutation, or attempted refutation to some degree, regarding the public statement released by the President's Advisory Committee on Building an Inclusive Community. For going forward, it's going to be called PACBIC, from the McMasters University. Now, I'm going to remind everybody, this is from a university, so we have to hold it to a higher standard than your HuffPo blog. March 16th, 2017. Statement regarding McMasters event featuring Dr. Jordan Peterson, Professor of Psychology at University of Toronto. We are deeply troubled that Dr. Jordan Peterson has been invited to speak at McMaster at an upcoming event about freedom of speech and political correctness. Most recently, Dr. Peterson has gained notoriety for his refusal to use the preferred pronouns of trans and gender non-conforming colleagues and students at U of T, defending his callous disregard for their personhood through a misguided deference to his freedom of speech and his distaste for political correctness. But freedom of speech doesn't now and hasn't ever meant that we can or should be able to say whatever we like in public spaces regardless of the impact of our speech on others. So far, we have a fair representation of Dr. Peterson, let's be honest here. He is fervently against censorship. He's fervently against the non-conforming binary, mostly due to the fact that he's being legally forced to. I believe in a few interviews he has stated that if he was asked politely by a trans student who was actually trans, not one of those, gender non-conforming binary whatever the fucks, that he would, in fact, refer to them by their preferred pronoun. It's the fact that it's under legislature that seems to be his largest gripe, which I can agree with entirely. Secondly, if your personhood is that deeply tied to your fucking pronouns, I don't know what to tell you, but you have some issues that you need to resolve, and it's not on society to do it for you. Lastly, freedom of speech doesn't now and hasn't ever meant that we can or should be able to say whatever we like in public spaces. Really. Because it feels to me like the concept of freedom of speech, even in its own just in its naming, we could have called it preferential speech or polite speech, but no, we call it freedom of speech. Freedom, as in you can do and say what you like. Although, in this case we're talking about speech, so say what you will. But now we're going to redefine it so that we can support our claim and lambaste an individual that we disagree with politically. Instead, the concept of freedom of speech has most often been mobilized to protect specifically counter-hegemonic ideas that actually challenge rather than reiterate the status quo. Holy shit! Oh, good God. The irony of such authoritarianism, trying to say that it's supposed to be counter-hegemonic and actually challenge rather than reiterate status quo. You guys have made this gender non-binary the status quo. To speak out against it is to do exactly what you claim freedom of speech is meant to be doing. Okay? Jesus Christ. Oh, I haven't laughed like that in a while. Freedom of speech was also not conceived as a means to protect normative ideas from contestation by marginalized communities, but to protect those whose speech might actually contest normative or nationalist ideas from censure, punishment, or retaliation by state forces. Okay, so now we have two different groups that you're trying to protect with. How are these people marginalized? That's one thing I would love to know. Other than the self-victimization complex that they have going on, how marginalized are the people who need to be protected by this free speech concept exactly? Could someone bring up some statistics, or are we just going to run with feelings? But anyway, moving on. It is true that in its current iteration in the constitutional amendment, or the Constitution, it states freedom from the state, but that's neither here nor there. The concept is not limited to just how it has been placed in the Constitution. It is an idea. It has merits and it has pros and cons. Personally, I feel that the pros greatly outweigh the cons because in freedom of speech, you have the ability to express yourself in whatever manner you desire, which you should have a right to. Self-censorship is one of the worst fucking afflictions you can give to humanity. It slowly seeps into everything and it just poisons every last part of you. It's horrible to see it in effect. There is nothing rebellious or revolutionary about insisting on the naturalness of the now long debunked gender binary, or what Dr. Peterson describes as the biological fact of sexual difference neatly categorizable as male and female, a fact subject to intense critique, questioning, and reconsideration by numerous scholars in humanities, sciences, and even the biological sciences for several decades now, which demonstrates the limited extent of Dr. Peterson's knowledge on this subject, since he seems entirely unaware of this body of literature, or else unwilling to engage with the challenge it poses to his own arguments. Okay, now see, that sounds good. That sounds clean. That sounds like an argument, right? Here's the problem with it, though. They open finger quotes, biological fact of sexual differences neatly categorizable as male and female. And then they go on to, in open parentheses, close parentheses, a fact subjected to intense critique, questioning, and even reconsideration by numerous scholars in humanities, social sciences, and even the biological sciences for several decades now. Now, this, other than being a call to authority, is just laughably stupid. Okay, if we're going to use this logic, then that means that the flat earthers and creationists have a point, and we have to listen to them. Because they've been arguing this for decades now, and some people with really high IQ, they've thought it over and they've changed their mind. That is effectively what is being presented here as a challenge. And as I'm sure Dawkins is sick of arguing with creationists over evolution, and he's stated his point fervently, I would imagine that we can afford Jordan Peterson the same level of acceptance. To state that there are people who disagree with the narrative or the idea or the concept of a thing does not debunk it, nor does it create some magical fantasy land where you win by virtue of other people agree with me. God fucking damn it. There is nothing subversive or radical about suggesting that one ought to be entitled to read the complexities of gendered identification on the basis of a quick and unwanted scrutiny of others' bodies and appearance. What? There is nothing subversive or radical about suggesting that one ought to be entitled to read the complexities of gendered identification on the basis of a quick and unwanted scrutiny of others' bodies and appearance. I'm brain farting on that one, so someone's going to have to read that one out to me and explain to me what the fuck it means. Moving on. This is not a freedom that needs to be defended, but rather the simplistic reassertion of the status quo, of ideas about gender and sexual difference that have become and stubbornly remain very widespread and commonsensical, even in the face of mountains of academic evidence to the contrary, unless... Okay. Present some of this evidence. Don't call and say, oh yeah, there's people working on it for decades now. Okay, there are people out there who've been living their entire lives practicing alternative medicine. That doesn't make them right, okay? It's, oh, it hurts my brain just trying to understand how that's a point of argument. And then it gets better because they follow it up with, and legislative changes made to protect the human rights of trans and non-conforming persons. Or gender non-conforming persons, whatever. So they, again, a call to authority. The fact that there's laws in place makes us right. That's ridiculous. It boggles the fucking mind that you can ever accept that as an argument, let alone present it from a university, no less. What the fuck? So let us not pretend that Dr. Peterson is a staunch defender of any sort of freedom. What he is defending, instead, appears to be his misguided presumption that his right to uphold the status quo trumps the rights of others to exist in public spaces and be treated with respect and dignity. Okay. You exist regardless of how I fucking talk to you. Okay? You exist. You are there. You are a person. But you do not have a right to dignity, respect, or what was the other word? Was respect and dignity. Free from hatred and discrimination. Yeah, you don't have a right to be free from hatred. Okay, nobody does. Hatred is an emotion that's going to be sent everywhere by everybody. You also don't have a right to be free from discrimination. I mean, you shouldn't be discriminated against on any basis, but you're going to be. You know, it's human nature to discriminate against people. We have an in-out dynamic. It's part of fucking life. I don't know what more you want me to fucking tell you. And in a world where hate and discrimination continue to flourish and appear to be on the rise, his way of expressing his right amounts to a presumptive sense of entitlement to deny others their status as fully and complexly human. So you claim he has a right to this, but earlier you claim he doesn't. So you're kind of contradicting yourself here again. Good job. There is nothing new about Dr. Peterson's position, then. It is a position taken by multitudes of others before him. There is also little to be gained by debating Dr. Peterson because he presents no argument founded on evidence that would actually be worthy of debate. That's funny. Oh, not presenting evidence. You mean like the thing you're doing now? Where you're poisoning the well, where all you're doing is lambasting his name in a public manner and claiming, well, I mean, look, we've got all this mountains of evidence over here and all these people that have been working really hard for a long fucking time to understand all of this. And we've made laws, so that makes us right, by default. Fucking hell. Unless one is of the view that certain people are less than fully and complexly human, of course, and are deserving of being treated with callous disregard for their personhood in public spaces, in which case such views, because they rest on faulty evidence and because they stand directly in the way of substantive inclusion of marginalized communities in our public institutions. I really wish I could avoid just the amount of buzzwords that get thrown around in these kinds of arguments and debates. It's so fucking annoying to deal with. Inclusion. You know, everybody has to be included. You can't be an outsider, you can't be left out, you can't be on the sidelines. You have to be part of the whole. And again, your personhood should not be defined by how others view you. If you are so weak that you have to define yourself by how everybody else looks at you, then I'm sorry, but you have problems. You should talk to somebody about them. The way of substantive inclusion are deeply unsettling and require critical questioning and contestation whenever and wherever they are articulated. Oh yeah, like, you know, pulling the fire alarms at men's rights activism movements, or screaming transphobic hate pieces of shit at him whenever he's trying to present his ideas, because, you know, that's really being inclusive, and that's, to use your words, contestation and critical questioning. Because when you call someone a transphobic piece of shit, you're really questioning their narrative. You're not just poisoning the well and, again, assaulting them with verbal harassment. Or, wait, no, sorry. It's not harassment when you do it. It's, reconditioning. Right. We stand in solidarity with trans and gender non-conforming members of our communities who have been called upon repeatedly in the last several months to publicly respond to and challenge Dr. Peterson's views, and to articulate again and again why they should be able to participate fully and meaningfully in public institutions in ways that reflect their humanity. Nobody is stopping you from participating. Again, if you are such a weak person that being misgendered sends you into a fucking tizzy and makes you feel like less of a human, you need help. Go talk to a therapist. Talk to a doctor. Talk to somebody, anybody who doesn't espouse these fucking retarded ideas. Okay? Go talk to them. They will help you. You will be much happier without this victim complex holding you back. We anticipate that Dr. Peterson's talk will and should result in public, critical opposition to his ideas, including public opposition to how he has treated trans and gender non-conforming people, which may take the form of public protest, which you have a right to. That's the whole concept of freedom of speech. You can decry people you disagree with. In the present climate, proponents of free speech may try to paint such opposition as just another indicator that Dr. Peterson's freedom of speech is in fact under threat. No, being publicly protested is not an attack on his free speech. An attack on his free speech is trying to limit what he's allowed to say. There is a difference between the two. However, when your protests are little more than just broad attempts at disparaging individuals from talking, either through making noise or just disrupting the event as a whole or pulling a fucking fire alarm like a goddamn child, you can't look at it as anything short of censorship. And at that point, it's a bit more of an attack on his free speech, especially if you no-platform him, as you're all very fond of doing. Though admittedly, maybe you guys aren't. Maybe I'm being judgmental on you. Instead, we suggest that wherever free speech is valued, protest, too, must be valued as a legitimate exercise of that freedom. Absolutely. However, do it properly. Follow the proper channels, follow the proper procedures. Don't just fucking be a disruptive little child throwing a goddamn tantrum because somebody is saying something you don't like. But protest does more than this. It also aims to articulate and demand the kind of university and the kind of society many of us are fighting for. There's another weasel word, many. So you imply something akin to a majority, when in actuality, I doubt you guys are the majority. I mean, you have a lot of power, you have a lot of sway, but, I mean, majority? Yeah, no. The majority of people aren't interested in this bullshit. The majority of people could not give less of a fuck. Okay, if your personhood, as I keep saying, is so easily shattered by something like this, I'm sorry, but you have bigger problems. One in which we recognize that speech or action that reduces the humanity of any group of people is not an exercise of freedom, but instead poses a threat to us all. Okay, here you're conflating the two. I can call you whatever the fuck I want. You can call me whatever the fuck you want. That is not an assault. It may constitute harassment under the law, but it's not an assault. Okay? Again, if your personhood is so weak and easily shattered, you really should talk to somebody. You know, there are therapists out there who will help you to not be a victim. I can't understand how anybody could want to be a victim. Jesus Christ. A statement issued by the President's Advisory Committee on Building and Inclusive Communities, Priorities and Planning Committee, and LGBTQ+ Working Group. The McMasters Student Union Diversity Services Director, the McMasters Students Union Queer Students Community Center Director. Why do you need both? Jesus Christ. You claim you want equity or equality. you misuse both, and it's so fucking sad to see some days. But you really want supremacy. Let's be honest here. You don't want equality, you don't want equity, you want supremacy. You want one group to feel special. All of the arguments that are presented typically revolve around the idea that certain privileged groups were privileged in a time long past. But because of that time long past, they are still privileged now, and the people that are now being born are in a weakened state because of all that, which is just fuck off. And the McMasters Students Union Women and Gender Equity Network Coordinator. Now here, I can appreciate the use of the word equity because it is not the same as equality, and it is in fact what you are predominantly searching for. You're not looking to be treated equally, you're looking to everybody have the same outcome, and that is why I will never be silent about you.